Hello, Algebra 1. This is Mrs. Martin here with your video today covering the contents of your syllabus. Let's begin with the basics. We'll start with materials. These materials are suggested and highly encouraged, but not required. In other words, I'm not going to grade you as to whether or not you have these materials, but I personally feel that they're an important component to helping you be successful in our Algebra 1 course. First, I think it's important for you to know that I don't mind what you use to do your homework in, as long as it's not something like a yellow highlighter. I personally use pen for my math all the time, not because I feel confident. If I mess up, I just put a line through my work, I remember that error, and I continue moving forward. So if you're the person who uses pen too, that's fine. I'm not a stickler for pencil. I also think it's important that you have some color. When I give you guys notes, I use a lot of color in my note taking. So to help you stay on track and to kind of help highlight the important components of our notes, I suggest having something with color for you to write with. In addition, I think it's important for you to have a notebook or some loose leaf lined paper or graph paper just for this class. Try not to have a notebook where every other page is work from a different class. Things get lost that way. So if you can have, again, a single notebook for just this class or lined paper that's put aside just for this class, that might be helpful for your learning. Finally, your Big Ideas student journal and textbook is going to be virtual. It's going to be an online app. So you won't be having to go to school to pick up those textbooks. I'll show you how to access those through Schoology when the time comes. So you might be wondering, what are we going to learn here in Algebra 1? Well, Algebra 1 covers the Common Core state standards for the course of Algebra 1. I took the learning targets from the curriculum map given by the district and the curriculum designed by our own Northridge Academy High School teachers, Mrs. Katz and Mrs. Burkhart, to arrange all those learning targets into 5 units: solving equations and inequalities, linear functions, systems of equations and inequalities, statistics, and finally, exponents and polynomials. I'll give a breakdown of the learning targets within each unit at the end of this syllabus. You usually have 3 components of a grade from me. You have work habits, cooperation, and a letter grade. And this is where the mastery learning stuff starts to take a turn for most of us. From now on, your homework is going to count towards your work habits grade. And we'll look more at what that looks like a little later in the syllabus. In case you haven't noticed, you do have a table of contents here on the left using Google Drive, and you can always click around and see the materials and the details about each one if you needed to see those or to share them with, for example, your parent. So, work habits, homework. Homework is really important, and although homework is no longer going to count towards your letter grade, it is extremely important because it helps support you and helps you learn the material so that you can perform well on the assessments. So don't be mistaken, even though homework only counts towards your work habits, it doesn't make it any less important. Okay, so please try to make a habit of completing those before we meet, because I will be giving you some time to self-check if you need to. For the most part, and we're still waiting to see what software is going to be available for us, you will be assigned homework from your Big Ideas math book virtually, as well as some sort of math software. We're hoping to get Alex, but we'll see what happens. I'll have a video with more details on how you would complete and submit your homework. Moving on to classwork, that's going to constitute your cooperation grade. Classwork consists of group work and other activities that we'll do together in class. Those activities are going to be very heavily technology-based, not only because we're engaging in distance learning, but also because, as mentioned in my previous video, my master's is in ed tech. So I'm trying out all sorts of technology to help support you and help engage you with the materials in class. So look forward to learning how to use and create with many types of technology. In addition to it being a great engagement tool, I think technology is incredibly important for you as a life skill. Knowing lots of technology could really help you out in the future when you're ready to get a job. So I like to expose you to lots of different technologies for that reason as well. When we get back to being in person, please know that occasionally we will have independent study time where you have a chance to build mastery and practice on those learning targets when we're in class so that I can support you. We'll also be having that independent study time on Mondays where we have kind of office hours time every other Monday to help support you if you need that extra time. Finally, assessments are what make up your letter grade, and that's assessments and assessments only. Since your letter grade is supposed to indicate how much of Algebra 1 material you have mastered, that is the reason why I have only the assessments making up that letter grade. I will make sure to indicate what activities constitute assessments so that you know which ones are counting towards your letter grade. Something else that I wanted to note, there is no cumulative final exam for this class. What that means is there is no final where I have all the different topics all in one test. Instead, on the day of finals, you will choose up to 3 learning targets, which we'll talk about in a moment, for which to have a final assessment. So you get to pick, and then you'll show me your mastery on those last 3 learning targets. Let's move on to classroom expectations. I do expect you to arrive to class on time and prepared with materials every day, just as I'm expected to arrive to class on time and prepared with my materials. Now, what that looks like in the classroom is going to be a little different from what it looks like on Zoom. Please take some time to look at your Zoom etiquette and expectations. Again, this is something that I'll cover in more detail in another video, but it'd be a great chance for you to look at that and know what I'm expecting when I see you. Keep all cell phones on silent and out of sight, unless it is being used for designated classroom activities. This is to avoid distractions during the little time that we have together to work on materials. Now, this next one is more for when we meet in class in person. My classroom is prone to ants, so I really only like my students to have water when we're in the class during class time. However, since you're at home, I'm sure you might have a beverage next to you during the Zoom, and that's fine. However, please try not to eat while we're on Zoom. It's very distracting again, especially if we're hungry. Advocate for yourself. If you missed assignments, be responsible and check online in order to avoid falling behind. As you may have started to notice, I try to keep my Schoology page very organized. So if you're absent, you can just go back into the folders, find the folder with the date of your absence, and complete those assignments in there to get credit. Academic honesty. This one's really important for me. It is very valuable to you and to your classmates to help others learn. However, just giving answers actually prevents people from learning. Okay, you're just giving it to them. You're spoon feeding them the materials, and so they themselves are not learning how to problem solve. Also, please know that when I'm assessing the body of evidence of your learning, I also must assess if work does not seem to be yours. That's part of my job. So you have to be able to explain your work for me to believe that it is your work. Okay, so please make sure that if you're helping each other, that's great. I think that's an important part of learning as well. But just try to avoid mindlessly copying. That doesn't help you, and it doesn't help the people if you're letting them copy. Finally, always follow our school roars. Be respectful, open-minded, ambitious, responsible, and safe. Moving along, there are many ways for you to stay connected with me. There's email, there's Remind, there's my Google Voice phone number, and of course, there's Schoology, that central hub where everything is located. So feel free to contact me at any one of those. During the school day, Schoology is probably the best way to contact me. After the school day, you can probably message me on Remind. Those go straight to my phone. And your parents could always contact me with that Google Voice phone number. As far as online working programs, that's still to be determined. We're waiting to see if we can get access to the Alex program, which would be great. And if we do, you'll be getting another video from me in regards to that. Now let's talk about assessments. If you've ever played video games, you know that you can't move on to more difficult levels until you have successfully passed the easier ones. Well, I'm a gamer, and I have adopted this policy in my classroom. Pretty much what that means is when you're taking an assessment, and each assessment is made up of one learning target, you need to score a 3 or a 4 to move on. If you score below a 3, it's not a big deal. It just means you need to spend a little more time together improving your understanding of that learning target. We'll practice some more together, and when you feel ready, you can retake that assessment so that you can achieve the 3 or 4 and move on to the next one. I find this concept very, very important. Let's consider this. It's difficult to move on when you're still trying to learn previous material. If you didn't know how to add, then multiplying would become very difficult, as multiplication is just repeated addition. Math is a delicate pyramid, using foundational math skills to build up understanding. With this in mind, your foundational skills are really important. And if they're a little weak now, then that means there's room to grow. And if they're strong, that means we can power ahead. Whatever you feel your level is right now, we're going to make sure we work hard together. That's me and that's you, to put in lots of effort and get those learning targets mastered. Now let's dig a little into our classroom philosophy. There's been a great deal of research that shows that certain combinations of teaching methods and grading methods and encouragement of growth mindset thinking work together to increase your long-term learning. It's not about you cramming for a test and then forgetting everything afterward. It's about you thoroughly learning material and hopefully enjoying it along the way. It's just as important that you enjoy the journey as you do the end result. With that in mind, I want to make sure that you are going at your pace while still making sure to complete all learning targets by the end of the year. So I hope that you're with me when we talk about this gamification of mastery learning. And ultimately, your grade at the end of this whole session will reflect what standards you've mastered in this course. So let's talk about a few things from a traditional classroom and why we've changed it for my mastery learning classroom. Instead of counting homework and classwork as part of the grade, I'm counting homework and classwork as a work habits and cooperation grade. Homework and classwork is important, precious practice that you need to prepare for assessments. However, it is my belief and the belief of many more people who are adopting mastery learning and grading that your grade should only reflect, again, the standards you've mastered, which is why the actual letter grade is only made up of assessments. Students all being assigned the same work at the same time. That's a traditional classroom. For us, it might look a little different. If you're still working on understanding learning target 1, but another student is ready to move on to learning target 2, we're going to make sure that we adapt that curriculum so that you are moving at your pace. I don't want to rush you ahead onto the next topic when you're barely starting to feel comfortable with the previous topic. So be aware that if you're going a little faster or you're a little behind other people, we're not comparing you to other students. We're comparing you to how you were the day before. So we're just trying to continue to grow with our math learning. Another thing that we used to do in traditional classrooms is average the scores. But I don't think that's very fair either. If you got a low score on one test, but a really high score on another test, you could still barely be passing a class, even though you've shown mastery in one and not mastery in another. For us, we're giving you scores that you can achieve by the end of the semester. So that means if you continue to grow and get better, you're going to replace older, lower scores to get a better grade by the end of the school year. I don't want to penalize you for needing time to learn and master your material. We call this looking at the body of evidence. Another thing many of you are familiar with or are used to is offering extra credit assignments to bring up your grade. Unfortunately, extra credit just ends up inflating your grade. And again, it won't reflect what you've actually mastered in the course. So I will not be offering extra credit assignments as a way to bring up your grade. I am always open to giving you extra practice if you feel that you need it to prepare for an assessment, but extra assignments will, again, not count towards the letter grade. Another thing some students might remember is you lose all credit on a problem because you forgot something like the minus sign in a traditional classroom. Well, in my classroom, tests are graded holistically, which means I look at the whole thing and I look at the types of errors and I consider those. And then I give you a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, or a 0 based on the work you've provided. I've detailed those numbers below. Finally, getting extra credit because you are well behaved in class or losing credit if you don't. Now, while I expect you to be well behaved in class, that's a class expectation, not a courtesy. So your behavior is not going to affect your letter grade. Let's talk about those numbers now when we're referring to assessments. If you get a 4, it means you've demonstrated complete and detailed understanding of the learning target. You know how to do it, and if you get a new problem, you would know how to face that new problem as well. A 3 is proficient. You pretty much know what's going on, but you might have a few misunderstandings or make a few errors along the way. A 2 is approaching. It means you're almost there, you're getting the big idea, but you still have some confusion about key ideas and you might make more than one error more than occasionally. A 1 is exploring. You're still trying to get the hang of it and you might have a little bit of an unclear understanding, but that's okay. You always have room to move up in these levels. Finally, a 0 means you haven't attempted the learning target yet, or you have not yet turned in work for that learning target to be assessed. Now, what will this look like on the report card? Because on our report card, we don't see 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We see A, B, C, D, F. So this is what it'll look like on the report card. An A means that you have a 4 in at least half of the learning targets that we've covered, and nothing less than a 3 in everything else. A B means that you have at least a 3 in half of the learning targets and nothing less than a 2. A C means that you have at least a 2 in all the learning targets. A D means you have at least a 1 in all learning targets. And a fail means that you've demonstrated few or none of the learning targets with at least a 1. Now, the way you might be able to see your letter grade, because it's going to look a little bit different in Schoology, is by looking at your Mastery tab in the Schoology page. Again, I'll have another video detailing more about that when we get there. Here are a few details about your work habits and cooperation grades. An E means you complete all your assignments and your work towards your learning goals, that you participate actively, that you exhibit qualities of a growth mindset, which we'll talk about more and more as we continue with our work, and that you actively engage in discussions and you always participate with others. An E also means that you demonstrate respect and responsibility towards not only me as your teacher, but also your classmates, your classroom, and the equipment that we're using, including technologies and softwares. And it also means that you're able to resolve conflicts in appropriate ways. If you have a disagreement about a topic on an assignment, it means that you're resolving those appropriately and that you're not letting distractions come up while we're in Zoom together. An S means you do all those things most of the time, and a U means you're struggling to complete those things. My expectation is that all of you are going to get E's, so I'm not really worried about it. Here are some classroom norms to promote mastery learning. For example, I only explain things when no one else in the room can. You being able to explain something means that you're experiencing a deeper learning that's going to stick with you long term. I don't want you to move on to geometry or algebra 2 and forget everything you learned here with me in algebra 1. So if you can explain it, then you've got it. And I'm going to rely on you to explain to your classmates when we're together in Zoom. Also, you've noticed I do lots of videos. I record many of my lessons and I post them to YouTube because I think it's important that you have an opportunity to pause and rewind and work on the material at your own pace. Plus, I'm not a fan of repeating myself, and YouTube videos love to repeat themselves. During independent study time, students can dedicate the time they see fit for watching tutorials and or practicing problems. So sometimes you'll have some free time to work on things and prepare for your assessments. Make sure you use that time wisely and become responsible with your time. Finally, I make it a point to post practice tests before the real tests. This is especially important when we start our first learning target. If we get a chance to use Alex, again, I will post more details about what that testing is going to look like. I know a lot of people feel that test anxiety, that drama that you feel right before a test. And I'm hoping that posting a practice test will help answer questions like, how do we know which problem type is going to show up? Or what is going to be on the test? Instead of you having to ask me, I'll just show you with the practice test. And finally, here are your learning targets for Algebra 1. There are quite a few, 27 to be exact, and it's broken down into 5 major units. And I hope that this gives a very clear map of what we're going to be covering over the course of this semester. I look forward to going through all of these learning targets with you this year, and I have every expectation that you'll be able to complete every single one. Take some time to look through those, see if you already are familiar with some, and get ready to learn some new stuff. That's it for me today. Until next time.